All right, everyone. So thank you for being here. My name is Chris Madrano Graham, for those who I have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, and I'm the Director of Sorority and Fraternity Life. Thank you for joining us tonight for our second Paws for the Cause event this semester. Now, some of you have asked, what is Paws for the Cause? Who's asked themselves what's Paws for the Cause? Okay, so I'm about to explain. Paws for a Cause is our new SFL continuous monthly education series that addresses issues that are essential for our community's success. So this includes conversations of hazing prevention, alcohol awareness, sexual assault prevention and awareness, issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice, mental health awareness, and overall well-being, amongst many other topics. It is important for us to have a pulse on these issues that our sorority and fraternity communities and campus communities face in order for us to be catalysts for change for the better. I'm very excited to have our Office of Sorority and Fraternity Life partner with the Division of Diversity and Inclusion to host this event as part of our Black History Month program calendar. In January, we paused for a super successful silent march hosted by our interfraternal brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha, in which we had over 350 members of the Greek community participate. Great job, Alphas, and great job, you guys. It was amazing to see all of our members walking in unity to honor the memory and legacy of Dr. King. In February, our Paws for the Cause will focus on issues of race and ethnicity on college campuses. It is Black History Month and how our fraternity and sorority communities can serve as catalysts for change to enhance equity. Today's topic is hard. Keep in mind, it is a hard topic to address and to digest, but I encourage you to open your mind and, most importantly, open your heart as we have these hard conversations to further shift towards a more inclusive and diverse fraternal and university community. Our sorority and fraternity life team would be more than happy to provide university resources for dialogue, discussion, processing, and educating our community if needed on the topic at the conclusion of the event. Especially if you're one of those DEI chairs for your chapter, I would love to have a conversation with you if you guys want to talk about it later. So my friend Lawrence Ross, or like I like to call him, L Boogie, will be bringing to light some of the things that we can work together on to do better and be better as fraternity men and women. Thank you once again to the Division of Diversity and Inclusion for partnering with us in this event, and hope that all of you will engage in this transformational leadership opportunity. So without further ado, please welcome Lawrence Ross. I'm sorry. See, I'm all nervous because he's here. I didn't even introduce you who he was. I didn't say who he was. Oh my goodness. Okay. My bad. Human error, my bad. Okay. So, Lawrence Ross. Lawrence is an alum of the University of California, Berkeley, and UCLA. Lawrence Ross holds a bachelor's degree in history and a master's of fine arts degree in screenwriting from UCLA. Ross's first book, The Divine Nine, The History of African American Fraternities and Sororities, was the first book written about all 9 African American fraternities and sororities. The Divine Nine is a multiple LA Times, Essence Magazine, and Atlanta Journal-Constitution bestseller. Ross's 7th book, Blackballed, The Black and White Politics of Race on America's Campuses, was published by St. Martin's Press. Blackballed explores the present and historical issues of racism on hundreds of American college campuses. Ross has lectured at over 1,000 colleges and universities, including UCLA, USC, Michigan, LSU, Texas, Stanford, and the University of Oklahoma. Ross has keynoted various conferences, including AFOV Central, NGLA, AFA, and SGLA. He has received multiple awards for his work on fraternalism, including the Jonathan B. Brandt Interfraternalism Award from Beta Theta Pi. Ross is a lifetime member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, having been initiated in 1985, Jesus, as a second semester freshman at UC Berkeley. and currently serves as chapter president of the Pi Rho Lambda alumni chapter in Inglewood, California. He lives in Los Angeles with his wife, April. I'm Team April. If you knew, you would know. And his son, Langston, is a grad student at the Savannah College of Art and Design in Atlanta, where he only calls home for money, as we all do. Thanks. Now you can clap for Lawrence Ross.
There will never be a nigga SAE. There will never be a nigga SAE. You can hang him from a tree, but he'll never sign with me. There will never be a nigga SAE. Now, how many of you heard that song before? Raise your hands. How many of y'all thought I just lost my mind? There you go, I thought so. That song was sung in March of 2015 by these two guys, Parker Rice and Levi Pettit, two members of Sigma Alpha Epsilon at the University of Oklahoma. Now, they were on what they called a party bus, having a grand old time. And basically what it was a bunch of fraternity and sorority members on a bus going from place to place. And at one point in time, they came before somebody who raised up their phone and started recording. Now, typically what happens is that if someone is recording something you really don't want to be saying, you stop saying it. But they didn't do that. They kept on singing. But what they didn't understand is that the person recording was offended by it. And they sent that video over to this group, OU Unheard. Now, OU Unheard is an African-American student group at the University of Oklahoma that just so happened to have been meeting with the university 2 months prior in January of 2015. And at that meeting, they've been talking to the university saying, hey, you know something? As Black students and Latinx students, we've been dealing with the issues of race and racism on a regular basis and no one's paying attention. And the University of Oklahoma came back and was like, oh, let's keep the conversation going. Let's talk some more. We'll do a study, the same type of things that you normally hear from administrations or from organizations. But as soon as they get this video, they say, oh, aha, this is exactly what we've been talking about forever. And so what they do, they decided to amplify it, and they sent it out to the New York Times. The LA Times actually covered it. Even Fox News thought it was racist. Fox News thought something was racist. And if you can get Fox News to say it's racist, that's a high bar. But of course, Sigma Alpha Epsilon is not a dumb organization, and I feel bad for this guy. He was a spokesperson at the time, and he comes out there and he's like, hey, this is horrible, this is abhorrent, but this is really just two people in one chapter. Two people in one chapter, that's it. We're gonna deal with it from that standpoint. And then after a number of different interviews, he was like, I think it's time for us to move forward. Now, again, nothing about that particular statement is anything unusual. It's a pro forma type of statement that you get from fraternities and sororities and universities all of the time. But the problem is that as the song began to spread, people all through the Big 12 conference began saying, wait a second, I've heard this song before. I've heard it at the University of Kansas, Kansas State, Texas Tech. I've heard this song before. So SAE says, well, wait a second, we're gonna go back and we're gonna do a study and we're gonna find out and get to the bottom of this. And so they do a six-week research and they come back to another press conference, this time with their president, who doesn't look very happy. And they said, oh, my bad. Remember how we said it was only two people in one chapter? Well, after an investigation, we found out that during a College Brother retreat that was not a part of the official program, 5 or 6 chapters began teaching it to each other after hours. But despite the fact that, we said it was originally 2 people in one chapter, and now it's moved to 4 or 5 chapters, or maybe 5 or 6 chapters, teaching it to themselves, we still don't believe that we have an issue when it comes to racism. Still, nothing unusual with that statement. But the one thing that used to occur with every campus racism issue, particularly with this particular one, was that the media was just thunderstruck. How could 2 white 19-year-olds sing about lynching African Americans from a tree? They just didn't understand it. The problem is because they couldn't understand it because one of the things that we do is we naturally give the sense of natural goodness to white students when there is a campus racism incident. Now, that's not what we do when we talk about Black and brown students. If Black and brown students get in trouble, we naturally go to all the pathologies in which they have been as an excuse of why they naturally should have been in this situation. They come from the inner city. They're from a single mother household. all the things, all the stereotypes that come with black or brown students. But we give them the benefit of the doubt. So when they actually began talking about the various excuses about why they actually decided to sing this lecture, Levi Pettit came out for a press conference and he had all the black people he'd ever met behind him. And he comes out there and says, I never actually, thought of myself as a racist. Well, that's not unusual either, because when we talk about racism, we usually think of somebody we don't like, just somebody we can pick out easily and say, those are people that are racist. So, pick a southern state you don't like, Mississippi, that's where all the racists are. But people don't see themselves as saying, I can do something racist. Or Parker Wright said, well, he was drunk, as though being drunk was like opening the door to racism that he had, right? But the one thing that happens with almost all campus racism incidents is that we infantile students, right? This is at Colorado State. They're all in blackface. You're going to see this over and over in my presentation. And they have a Snapchat that says Wakanda forever, okay? So what happens when the media actually decide to cover them? They said boys at Colorado State. Now, why do they say that? Well, because if I term you a boy instead of a man or a woman, I'm saying that you're not mature enough to actually understand what you're doing. So if you're not mature enough to understand what you're doing, then you can't be responsible for doing the racism in the first place. So really, racism doesn't really exist in this part. But we don't just do this on college campuses. How many of you remember this guy, Ryan Lochte, the Olympic swimmer? Y'all remember him? Remember I think it was 2016, he was in Brazil. He busts up a gas station for some unexplicable reason. The next morning, all the people were, friends were all giving, character witnesses on the morning shows, and they come out and they're saying, well, Ryan is just a big kid. Ryan was 34 years old, y'all. I don't know how long y'all adolescents actually last, but it's not until 34 years old. But my favorite excuse of all around why two white 19-year-olds decided to sing about lynching African Americans from a tree centers around this one person. There's one person, I swear, that I would take all of my assets and bet that 99% of you, all of you, just think to yourself of one person you think you can blame it on. You would have that in your head. So everybody, put your hands up right here. Think of the person that you would say is the blame for two 19-year-olds singing lynching African Americans from a tree. I put all my assets to say that we're all thinking about this person, Waka Flocka Flame. Wait, y'all ain't thinking about Waka? Let me explain. So Waka was supposed to appear at an IFC house and perform at University of Oklahoma. He sees the video and he goes, wait a second, this video is racist. I'm not performing at this house. And that was a bridge too far for this guy, Joe Scarborough. And Joe Scarborough, Morning Joe. And Joe Scarborough was like, aha, it's because hip hop and quote unquote gangsta rap. Now let me tell you something. Chris gave my bio, but she didn't actually go way back. When I was a managing editor of a hip hop magazine. I love hip hop. This is the 50th year of hip hop. If you in 2015 are still using the term gangster rap, I'm going to assume that you don't know what the hell you're talking about when it comes to hip hop, right? But that's okay. He said it's because of hip hop, gangster rap. Now, here's the deal. There's a lot of things you can blame Waka for when it comes to music. Some people say Waka looks exactly like me. Hey, okay, blame him for that. But thinking that Waka is the reason why two white 19-year-olds decided to sing about lynching African Americans from a tree doesn't make any sense. But let's go with it. Let's say that Waka Flocka Flame is the reason. No, let's say hip hop in general is the reason that this occurred. If that's the case, what about these guys? This is Tau Kappa Epsilon in 1963 at Cal State Long Beach. And in 1963, Cal State Long Beach suspended Tau Kappa Epsilon for singing this song. Bye bye black boy, you better play it cool or else we'll bomb your Sunday school. And they were talking about the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, where 4 little black girls were murdered by the KKK as they attended Sunday school. Is this a coincidence? Is this something that's a happenstance? Or is this part of a long stream of systemic racism that we deal with on college campuses that we never address? That's what we're going to be talking about here. But hey, I just came up here and just started singing. I didn't even introduce myself or bring any greetings. So this is actually my second time at Ohio University. And I always talk about when I come to Ohio University, this is what I thought when I was growing up that college actually looked like. So I love this actually campus, but I'm gonna give you a little bit of greetings. So let's begin by saying, Good evening, Ohio University. Oh, heck no. I'm coming from Los Angeles, California, where it's a balmy 75 degrees every single day. And y'all gonna give me this type of response? I have been at Ohio State this month. I've been to Dayton this month. I will talk about y'all on the old people social network of Facebook. But I'm gonna give y'all a second chance, trying to get right with God. I'm gonna give y'all a second chance. We're gonna try to do this one more time. Good evening, Ohio University. Much better, much better. My name is Lawrence Ross. I am the author of this book, Blackballed: The Black and White Politics of Race on America's Campuses. I've been lecturing about fraternalism for the past 23 years. It makes me feel old, but yes, it has been that long. And one of the things that I noticed as I was lecturing at college campuses is that students would come up to me, particularly students of color, would come up to me after the lecture and talk about their experiences. And they would talk about their experiences, and they would do it in almost conspiratorial hushes and talk about the things that they were going through that no one was talking about. And at first I was thinking maybe this is just anecdotal for, at the time, as millennials who were on campus. And I said, well, let me do the research. And I went all the way back to 1946. And it wasn't anecdotal. It was as common as cheerleaders on the side of a football field. And it's important for us to understand that. But, I mean, to be honest, when, in K-12, when our parents are badgering us to get great grades and SAT scores that are high enough to get into Ohio University, nobody's talking about the sociological issues. Basically everybody's gonna say, hey, come to college, it's a transformational experience. And it is. It's a transformational experience. You're gonna meet new people. You're gonna come from different areas. You're gonna get new thoughts. Everything is a transformational idea. And basically, how we kind of put it, we try to make it into like a educational Disneyland. Right? People come from various areas, some people from Akron, some people from Columbus, some people from Dayton, some people from Cleveland, and you all come together and everybody's a Bobcat. Everybody's cool, right? But the problem is we still have to deal with the societal issues that are outside the college campus. Let's see what some of the things that we're dealing with. So a couple of months ago, three Asian students at NYU were assaulted on campus. A couple of years ago, right before the pandemic, these two members of Alpha Phi were on Snapchat, one with a banana saying Izzy on 1/16 black. That was on February 1st, start of Black History Month. What is she trying to say about black people? No, I can't have 800 people in this room and y'all can't know what that means. What is she trying to say about black people in this? That black people are what? Thank you. Black people are monkeys. Then this University of Missouri, a couple of weeks ago, we're talking about they've been targeted with racist social media posts. University of Evansville, we're talking about a racist incident that occurred outside the campus. Presbyterian College, Howard University, historically black college university, women's lacrosse team came to play Howard, and members of Kappa Phi were calling them racist names and slurs. Lambda Chi Alpha at the University of Georgia, a black woman on campus was part of a stream, interior social media stream for Lambda Chi Alpha, and that was racist. She found it and she published them in public. At MTSU, a black MTSU student, Middle Tennessee State student, was pledging Kappa Sig and he had to go deal with racism while he was pledging. Abilene Christian University. This woman was walking up and down the aisles talking about this is why Black Lives Matter. Candace Burgess at Oklahoma State when he says he only likes black girls. Franklin and Marshall. These guys decided they were going to dress up as one is a Mexican, one is a Chinese person, but he has his hands by his eyes to create the folds of Asian eyes. University of North Dakota. Lock that black bitch out. Okay, abhorrent. 3 days later, they're in blackface. Now, to tell you honestly, the first thing I was more surprised about was that black people went to the University of North Dakota. Who knew? 350 black people, all right. But would I have told somebody to go there? Now, this person doesn't have anything to do with my lecture. He just looks like every college president I've ever seen in my life. But I use him because in 2015, Inside Higher Education did a longitudinal study where they asked about the racial climate on college presidents on college campuses. They asked a very simple question. Is it excellent, good, fair, or poor? All right, very simple. How do you see your campus? Well, 81% of college presidents said that it was either good or excellent. Now, how do they view other campuses? Well, they said, well, 43 are good or excellent. Basically, some are good, some are bad. Some are good, some are bad. Between 2015 to 2016, there were hundreds of campus racism incidents because people were paying attention, and campus racism protests. The media said, hey, they were spreading like wildfire, right? And you see it, there's no geographic, logic to it. It's everywhere around the country. University of Missouri had one of the largest protests. They were protesting the chancellor and the president, who eventually left. But it was happening at Tufts University. Yale had a very polite one in terms of the Ivy Leagues. And my alma mater, the University of California, Berkeley, where I readily admit we protest Tuesday for not being Thursday, it gone everywhere around the country. So, told you it's a longitudinal study. 2016, they asked the exact same question. What is the racial climate on your college campus? Excellent, good, fair, or poor? Now, you Ohio University students, I'm pretty sure are smarter than I was when I entered Berkeley, right? I'm thinking that you would say logically, if you have hundreds of campus racism incidents, hundreds of protests happening around the country, logically, the number is going to go down in terms of how people view the racial climate. You would be wrong. College presidents were like, the number went up. 84% thought it was excellent or good on their college campuses. But how did they view everybody else? 24% saw everybody else's college and university as being actually good or excellent, down from 43%. So what does that mean? That means that how they said, we are excellent, but they're terrible. You need to focus over on that side. So what happens is that oftentimes administrations are reactive versus being proactive. You can't be proactive about a disease that you don't know you have. And if you don't know you have it or you're not even preparing for it, well, how do you know that you don't have a disease, right? And what I found from 1946 all the way up until 2015 when I finished my book, was that there was a standard type of formula that institutions, fraternities, and sororities, IFC, Pan-L, always use in order to deal with campus racism incidents. And I called it 3 I's equals a miss. Very simple to see. The very first thing they did was individualize it. So they would say 2 people in 1 chapter. That's it. Don't look any further. All right? The next thing would be to minimize it by saying, basically, we don't have a problem in our organization. That's just over here. Don't look at it. Our values are still great. The last thing, trivialize it. Trivialization can come in a number of different ways. To focus the actual focus, turn the actual focus over to the actual idea of free speech, which is, I love free speech. I love the First Amendment. That's the reason why I'm up here. But also, you can just basically lie about something and throw something out. So now the big lie is critical race theory. You just apply it to anything. If it's peanut butter and jelly, critical race theory. You can just do whatever you want to say is saying it. Even the guy who actually started the whole thing said he invented it, right? But when you do that over and over and over, you dismiss the concerns of students of color because you're not actually dealing with the issue on their campus. But then again, Americans are ignorant about racism on purpose. We like being ignorant about racism because we feel sensitive. We don't want to talk about racism. It's almost as though, oh my God, if we talk about racism, something bad's gonna happen. There's nothing bad's gonna happen about it, right? And then when you don't talk about racism, well, then things like this can happen. For example, the State Board of Education at the state of Texas came out with a textbook a number of years back where they basically said that my great-great-great-grandfather was not a slave, he was just a worker. Like he got a paycheck, after picking cotton in Texas. No, he was a slave. And when you use euphemisms, if you notice, I don't use euphemisms, right? I don't use the N-word doing this. I want you to be, you are 18 to 22-year-olds. I believe that you have the understanding and the maturity to understand the context in which I use the words. And I want you to understand the nastiness in which the context is in, right? So we don't use euphemisms. So euphemisms hiding the fact that my great-great-great-grandfather does not do anything but whitewash what happened in terms of history. But at some point in time, when I come to a school, I can't rely upon what you learned in K-12. I can't even rely upon what you learn at school. So we have to have a foundational base. So we're going to do what I know you didn't expect it, but we're going to do what I call a racism reality quiz. Y'all ready for a quiz? Don't be so enthusiastic. Y'all ready for a quiz? All right. So the first question I'm going to ask is, do you know your race or ethnicity? All right. So I'm going to call out your race or ethnicity. What I want you to do is raise your hand, make a lot of noise so everyone can see you. All right. Oh, I got your attention now, don't I? All right. So I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm black. And so as a point of privilege, I'm going to ask, where are my black folks at? That's what I'm talking about. There you go, there you go. Settle down, settle down, settle down. All right, where my Latinx folks at? Oh, wow, there you go. There you go, all right, all right. Where are my South Asian folks at? Oh, all right, okay, I see a few. Where, do we have any Native Americans in the house? There you go. There you go. All right. And last but not least, but first in my heart, where are my white folks at? Every single school I go to, I ask where the black folks at, they jumping on chairs. Latinx folks, same thing, they jumping on chairs. Asian, South Asian folks, yeah, you know, like, all right, I'm all right here. Usually when I ask if there's a Native American, y'all for some reason start clapping. Like, you know, they made an achievement, okay. But 90% of my audience is always white. And I can always tell, it's like 90%, they go, okay, I was on Ancestry.com, I swear to God, I'm part, oh, okay, I'm white. You raise your hands. Now the reason you do that is not unusual. The reason why you do that is because there's a difference in how students of color see the world versus how you guys see the world, who are white, right? Students of color recognize as early as pre-K. And actually, studies say that basically all children in pre-K recognize in terms of racial difference, and in particular, how students of color are treated versus how they're treated if they're white. But also within this context is that when you talk about, you know, black and Latinx or Asian students, they've always been able to see who and what they are at all times. We are permanent minorities in a country, There's no day when I walk in and go, Tuesday's all black day. No, it doesn't work that way. We're gonna be 13% of the population today, tomorrow, and all other days, right? Okay, so you know who you are. Now can you point out other people, all right? So all my Latinx folks, raise your hand again. Okay? So my Asian, South Asian folks, stand up for a second and point to all the Latinx folks that you see inside the room. There you go. Paul, yeah, there you go. Hope you was paying attention. There you go. Okay. All right. Now all my Latinx folks, point to all the Asian, South Asian folks that you see. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. All my black folks, where y'all at? There you go. There you go. You know where they are. Point to all the white people that you see in this room. All right, all right. My white folks, this is the one time in your life you get to do this. Point to all the black people that you see in this room. Oh, no, I want to see some points. I want to see some. There you go. Yeah, all right, all right. Why can't y'all point to me? I'm up here. All right. And for my Native American in the audience, can you stand up for a second? All right. So, for my Native American, I want to ask you a question. Point to all the people you wish had stayed on their own continent. You see that? I went to the University of Oklahoma, and everybody laughed at that line. And she was a member of the First Nation. She was like, I ain't laughing. I wish y'all had stayed on your own continent. Now, if you know who you are, and you can point out other people, well then, you're not colorblind. And I don't want you to be colorblind. A lot of times we've used the concept of colorblindness to try to erase this notion that if you recognize a person's race or culture that you're being automatically racist. That's not true. If I'm an African-American woman standing here, you need to understand everything about me from both me as an individual in terms of my bio and everything I've done, but you also need to know the plural understanding of race and gender too. We don't just get here magically, and there's a struggle to get here. If I'm a Latinx woman, it's the exact same thing. when we talk about this, a lot of times what we want to say is that, well, race is a biological nothing. That is absolutely true. Race is a biological nothing. There has been many races for as long as we've had human beings on this planet. In this country, the Irish and Italians weren't considered to be white. In fact, the Irish weren't even considered to be human. But then eventually in the system that we have, they were seen to be white. But because race is a biological nothing does not mean it's not a sociological everything in this country. So let me look at this. So this is my racial makeup, right? I'm part Native American, hey. Part South Asian, Southeast Asian, everybody up there. I'm part Central and South African. I'm part Scandinavian. Bet y'all didn't have Scandinavian on my bingo card. There you go. North African, British and Irish, probably from the same place where that Scandinavian came from, and West African. All of this is my DNA. But I don't go around saying that I'm Scandinavian, Southeast Asian. I'm a black man. I'm a black man sociologically. I'm standing in front of you as a black man. And it's important for you to understand that. But a lot of times when we talk about race, we basically are divided up into two different groups. And I'm going to make a wild generalization. I will make a wild generalization. I will cop to that. But the race averse typically are white students, white administrators, white faculty members who don't want to talk about race. On a benign sense, it's why does everything have to be about race? Why do you have to deal with the race card? Why is this and why is that? On the not so benign, it's well, I'm going to do something racist because I think it's funny, right? The race-aware students tend to be students of color. If they will know every aspect of the demographics on Ohio University's campus. If I ask the black students, how many black students are at Ohio University, they will say there are 770 black students here. 75 are engineers, 15 are going to be transferring to Howard University for a semester, 5 were sick. They will know every single iota thing about because that's the universe in which they live. When they walk into classrooms at the beginning of a semester, the first thing they do is they look around and see if they know anybody, and they go, hey, you and I, we're going to get through this, right? A lot of times when we talk about race averse, we also try to create an image that is not necessarily, and this is on a benign sense, right? An image that sometimes is not accurate to what our actual demographics are. So for example, I have been to most IFC, Panhellenic, and most university homepages. And they try to create this notion of American diversity that kind of doesn't reflect what the actual numbers are. So if I haven't been to Ohio University's homepage, but if I was going to Ohio University's page, I'm pretty sure it looks a little bit like this, right? 2 black people, 2 white people, Latina on the side, Asian dude, he could be Hawaiian, Asian, he could be Native American, we don't know what it is, right? And usually they spread the brother out in civil engineering and French lit. He's in multiple parts of the website. And this also looks like your IFC Panhellenic page. This is what we're trying to say is what we're trying to strive for. But then, the black people in this picture are 38% of this picture. I don't think 38% of the black folks on this, 38% of the people on Ohio University's campus are black, are they? No, I don't think so. But a lot of times when we talk about race-aware students of color are often the black guy, right? They're in a space, but they're not necessarily connecting. And it's important for y'all to understand how we connect them. Now, let's get to the roots of the matter. And I only put this in here because I love the roots. What does America believe is part of its foundation? Is it freedom and democracy? Hell yeah, it's freedom and democracy. Yeah, that's what makes us America. Freedom and democracy is the principles and ideals of this country. Is it free market capitalism? Yeah, for my conservative friends out here, they're like low taxes too. Okay, cool. All right. Or is our foundation, the essence of America, the thing that I'm pretty sure a lot of y'all are striving to attend, which is Beyonce? Well, one of the things, as beautiful as Beyonce is, one of the things that we never talk about in terms of one of the things that we deal with is white supremacy. All right? Now, I'm not talking about the KKK member in the hooded thing or the swastika tattooed on his forehead. I'm talking about the idea of who is human, who is seen as a default normal as humanity, a default normal, and then who is seen as the outsider other. Now, they can be human as long as we vouch for them. And the exact same way I was talking about before is the person, the student of color who gets in trouble, we automatically go, oh, well, that's because they come from a single family, or that's because they come from the inner city. But then you get a character witness and they're like, oh, okay, they're okay, right? Now, for all my white students, raise your hands again. There you go. We now have an old-fashioned trigger warning on this. I am not saying that you all are racist. I'm not saying that you all have a freshly clean KKK uniform in your closet that you just can't wait to put on, all right? Now, when I talk about this society having to fight white supremacy, I can also say this is a misogynist society. That's a foundation. Y'all don't understand? Oh, this is really also for people, because I one time had an IFC young man come up to me and said, well, I've never seen it. This is a white IFC man. I've never seen it, so basically it didn't exist. Well, I'll tell you, let's throw race out for the side. Let's talk about misogyny, a misogynist society, right? This event will end and it will be dark outside. Every single man will walk out of this building and go to wherever they want and not think a single thought about their safety. Not one thought about their safety, about whether or not they're gonna go, how they're gonna get there. They don't care. Every single woman in this room will go and make a plan. They will have an institutional understanding of not safe spaces on this campus. They will make a plan of deciding whether or not they go together, or whether or not if they're going by themselves, who are they going to call to be able to say that they arrived to their space by themselves safely. Some of the women in here will make a decision that they want to jog on campus at night. They will consciously be thinking about all the different areas that are unsafe, or maybe at some point in time, make a decision to carry a stick. Now, the fact that men don't ever have to think about that doesn't mean that misogyny or living in a misogynist world doesn't exist. Same thing happens when we talk about race and white supremacy, all right? So y'all still with me? All right. Don't believe me. I'm just an LA Times bestselling author, all right? Believe Thomas Jefferson, who said basically when it came to blacks, he thought, we were inferior. Now, okay, Thomas Jefferson, man who, founder of this country, all men are created equal and all that, who owned human beings. All right, contradictions. Let's move on perhaps to Abraham Lincoln. Now, I'm going to say, as a historian, Abraham Lincoln is not the most egregious person in the world that I could put up here. But he's a great example. During his senatorial debates with Stephen Douglas, he had to get elected, so he decided to pander to a society that the idea of blacks being equal was just like saying Martians were equal. It didn't make any sense. And he said basically if he had to order society, white people would be the superior. Now, from this idea of white supremacy, you have slavery. And then when slavery goes away, it morphs into other things like Jim Crow segregation, right? And also it morphs into other policies like the Chinese Exclusionary Act of 1882, which cut off Chinese nationals being able to immigrate into this country at the exact same time, almost literally the same time as Eastern and Southern Europeans had the largest migration into this country, right? Now, when we talk about systemic and individual racism, I know the first thing most of y'all are going, he put Trump in there. Listen to me. I could put Hillary Clinton up here talking about super predators. It's not, racism is, believe me, it's not a conservative or a progressive thing. But there's one specific example when we talk about racism that I want to illustrate with this. First thing when we talk about the different issues in terms of racism, we're talking about the idea of difference. So a lot of times people will take the pseudoscience and then apply pseudo-intellectualness and say, hey, something, there's a natural order of things in terms of intellect. So blacks and Latinos on IQ tests don't score as high as Asians and whites, and so therefore, by biology, they must not be as bright as everyone else. It's just junk science. And you'll see that in things like the bell curve, which I'm hoping is still not being read to this day. But the reason I have Trump in here is because he is alleged to have said, in terms of the idea of natural superiority, he has been claimed to have said that the only countries run by blacks are shithole countries, which really just is about saying that when it comes to one's natural ability, that race has something to do with that. Whether or not, if you're black, it's almost always you're going to be inferior. But the biggest thing is the idea of dominance. The biggest thing on campus racism is the idea of dominance. And dominance when it comes to the idea of space. One of the real issues when we talk about campus racism, and particularly when we talk about IFC and Panhellenic, is that when you have non-diverse spaces, Those spaces fill a vacuum in which you can then have racist, whatever incidents fill those spaces. And like this guy right here was a University of Connecticut law student who had smeared himself for Halloween full of black paint. Now here's my deal. He felt safe enough to be able to do that. As a black man or a student of color or a person of color, would I want him as a judge? A lawyer? Do I want him as a politician making policy? No. So let's see some of the things that have been occurring. Do y'all remember this about a month or two months ago? This sister had way more patience than I did. This woman was just throwing slur after slur after slur. University of Kentucky. University of Houston. This happened a couple of weeks ago. The police came with guns raised on a black student who was holding a piece of paper. He was in the theater squad, and they were rehearsing a theater play. And he thought, the police officer said he thought he saw a knife. Put a gun up to the student. Now, instead of the university saying, wow, we need to retrain our police, their solution was the brilliant one of saying maybe students should wear safety vests while they're outside. No, that's when we're talking about being reactive versus being proactive. University of Michigan, these two students were in blackface, one of which said, I am the least racist person you will ever meet. And I said, you're the least racist person I'll ever meet. Who's the most racist person I'll ever meet? College Republicans, literally right around this time, a few years back, giving Valentine's out at Central Michigan, talking about my love for you, burns like 6,000 Jews. Boston College, I like my steak and cheese like I like my slaves. Tau Kappa Epsilon, Florida International University, that Chris used to work at. Jewish girls with a pile of ashes, like the Holocaust. Now, campus racism isn't new, particularly when we're talking about Greek life. For example, 1911, this organization, Kappa Alpha Nu, was look at you. Kappa Alpha Nu was founded by 10 men who basically wanted to create a structure that allowed them brotherhood and to flourish. But as they were going, and interacting with their white students, what they found is the white students would slur them by calling them Kappa Alpha Nig. And in 4 years later, they had to change their name to what we now know them as Kappa Alpha Psi. So this is not new whatsoever. And as long as students of color have been coming on college campuses, there has always been this struggle between freedom and democracy and white supremacy. And it culminated in one of our most infamous stands in the schoolhouse door with Governor George Wallace, the governor of Alabama, segregationist, who said that he would stand in the schoolhouse door to prevent it from being integrated by two black children. Two black students. And across from him is a Department of Justice official who has a court order to integrate the school. Now, it's easy to isolate it and individualize this, right? It's easy to say that George Wallace is the bad man and this is the good man. But in reality, what we're talking about is the metaphor of freedom and democracy against white supremacy. The good news is that white supremacy always loses. White supremacy always loses. And at this time, George Wallace stepped aside. By the way, this is also 3 months prior to the Teeks singing about Bye Bye Black Boy. And so when the University of Alabama was integrated, did that suddenly end racism at the University of Alabama? What do y'all think? No? Did the state of Alabama suddenly become non-racist because there were two members of two black people in the University of Alabama? Of course not. In order to be able to deconstruct the intentional racism, and it's important for you to understand, this is not just bad people. It's not just bad people doing bad things. This is intentional racism. What they decided to do is they said, we're going to create a new policy called affirmative action. Now, affirmative action was basically a Democrat and Republican idea. John F. Kennedy talked about it. Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1966 talked about affirmative action. Richard Nixon, Noah's liberal Democrat, a conservative Republican, used it to great effect in terms of opening up the doors of the government to create a middle class for blacks, right? And one of the things that you have to recognize is that affirmative action is the thing that actually said, wait a second, we have intentionally decided in government, whether or not we're talking about government, we're talking about in institutions, or we're talking about in culture, to close off parts of society and create a second-class citizenship when it came to people of color. blacks, not just blacks in terms of segregation, on the West Coast, Japanese, the Chinese Americans also. In Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, it was oftentimes Mexican Americans, right? So it opened up the door wider. Basically, it said, you know something, the school district in Columbus is a place that we have traditionally underfunded. Traditionally move funds from one place to the other. What we're going to do is we recognize, you know what, that there's not that much of a difference between 1,400 score at SET and 1,200 score. We're going to open up the door wider. Because we know that student over there who had limited resources can thrive at Ohio University. Now, that doesn't mean that people didn't protest almost immediately. One of the most popular protests is something called the anti-affirmative action bake sale. And I think another school just did that, maybe at Clemson, if I remember correctly. This is at my alma mater, the great liberal UC Berkeley that everybody likes to talk about. So people against affirmative action, what do? Well, they throw up a table and they put a bunch of baked goods up there. Cookies, you know, sweets. It always looks good, to tell you honestly. And then they put up a menu in which they designate how much people are going to pay for it. And they say, well, if you're a woman, you get 25% off, because that's what you get in terms of admissions. Native Americans, 25 cents, you only pay 25 cents. Blacks only pay 75 cents. Latinos, $1. Asian, $1.50. And whites, who's the default normal in this? Whites are at $2. And usually they bring out some student who has a Wikipedia understanding of Martin Luther King, who says, hey, you know, Martin Luther King said, we don't judge people by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. We would not charge people different amounts for baked goods, so why do we give different admission standards for students of color to get into UC Berkeley? What they don't talk about is that the educational disparities are baked into American society. How many of you all understand the concept of redlining? Raise your hands. Okay, not that many. Redlining is and was a thing that we still deal with today. Redlining was a concept that began in the mid-1930s when the government started backing mortgages for banks and saying, hey, we want to back your mortgage. Almost all of you will receive a FHA loan for your first house. All of you pretty much will. And that will be a government-backed loan. In the 1930s, they were backing those loans, but they also had stipulations. And they said, you cannot give these loans, these mortgages out in areas that are black, Asian, or Latino. And what realtors would do would draw lines, red lines around those areas. This is where I'm from, Los Angeles. If you ever wanted to know how inner cities were created, this is how they were created. If you ever wanted to know how South Central Los Angeles was created, this is how it was created. And what would happen is basically the ones that lived in the people of color who lived in areas in which they were congregated, their homes were automatically less valuable by the color of their skin versus white homes. If you ever want to know why suburbs exist, the exact same thing. White suburbs tended to be more valuable, and so they tended to do as much as they possibly could to keep people of color out of those neighborhoods. One person of color coming into the neighborhood was always the sign of a panic, because that meant the neighborhood, because of the nature of the person's skin, was going to drive down the prices. And realtors would come in, it was called block busting. They would come in and say, hey, they're coming, you need to buy another house over here, further out. Now, if you have two different areas, black neighborhoods, white neighborhoods, Latinx neighborhoods, Asian neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods that are people of color neighborhoods are depressed by the fact of the skin color and discrimination and racism, well, then what happens to the school system? How are K-12 schools funded in our country? Property taxes, right? So what we have is right now, this is 2019, this is not 1950, 80% of Latinx students and 74% of black students go to segregated schools in this country. 43% of Latinx students and 38% of black students go to intensely segregated schools. Now, what does that mean? That's a school with less than 10% of the school population being white. Now, there's nothing about going to all black or all Latinx or a mixed school like that that makes it inferior, except for the fact for every 10% increase in the number of minorities at a school, it's a $75 per student decrease in the funding. How many AP courses are you getting at a school in Columbus or Cleveland or Dayton that is dealing with the issues of being underfunded? Not that much. And so what happens is that when you compare apples to apples, non-white school districts and white school districts, there's a $23 billion deficit, which means less resources. And it's not because people don't favor education from K to 12. This is just how we are in our neighborhoods, or the property taxes, or where people actually live. Now you would think, understanding this, white students would go, wow. If you're a black student or a Latinx student who got on this campus, you had to overcome a lot of hurdles. But that's not how they see it. Baylor did a study, simple study. They asked them, how do you see black, Latinx, and Asian students? And they said, well, blacks and Latinx don't work hard enough. Remember that menu? 75 cents for blacks, $1 for Latinx. That's how they saw. Asians, cold but competent. They gave them right next to whiteness, right? $1.50, right? The problem is, if you don't believe that students of color belong on campus, well, then it becomes easy to denigrate them. They're not human, really, to you, because you don't see them in your spaces. You don't interact with them, and so you could denigrate them. So, for example, this is right before the pandemic. These two Native Americans were taking a high school tour, just like every one of you, high school tour of Colorado State. And when they did it, a white parent called the police on them, saying that she didn't believe that they were students. Nothing about them except they were Native American. And she did this numerous times. A white Yale grad student would call the police on black grad students who would do the most simple college thing: go to sleep in the common area in between classes. She called the police on this one woman, checked her key, made her prove that she could get into her dorm. At Ball State, this member of Kappa Alpha Psi, he comes to his class early, sits down, and the professor says, no, I need you to move. He was like, why I gotta move? He has everything all connected up. Then the professor calls the police on him because he decides not to move. And then at Suffolk University, this professor accused a Latina of actual plagiarism because he did not believe that she could use the word hence in an essay. Now, I don't know where the word hence suddenly became a non-Latina word, but that doesn't make any sense. And you began to see people begin to protest. The first one being at Michigan, with the hashtag Being Black at the University of Michigan, where they began talking about you just can't do performative diversity. At UCLA, they protested the fact that UCLA had more championship banners at the time, about 125 championship banners, than incoming black men coming into the school. On a school of 44,000, there were approximately 50 black men coming into the school. And then something I see in IFC Panhellenic all the time at conferences is where minority students of color would come to me and talk about this one thing: Courtney, the erasure of students of color in organizations. So let's talk about the modern college campus and racism in predominantly white fraternities and sororities. Now, I've given this lecture numerous times, obviously, and I've given it before Kappa Kappa Gamma, Delta Gamma, Beta Theta Pi, number of different organizations. But for the last, I've been a brother of Alpha Phi Alpha for 37 years. And in all that time, I used to be amazed by how just gentle people talked to IFC and Panhellenic members about race and racism. Never understood it. Because every Panhellenic and IFC person I talked to were fine. They could deal with the issues and understand the concept. But in the past, people tried to treat you all, particularly white IFC and Panhellenic members, like you were kid gloves. It was always, we were bad in the past, we're good now, live your values, and please let's stop talking about race because I don't want to hear from your parents or your alums or whatever. It never made any iota of sense. In particular, because when we talk about race and racism, the burden shouldn't be on the people who are targeted, who are black and Latinx and Asian students. This is everyone's problem to deal with. Now, there has been a movement with DEI chairs. Well, where are all my DEI chairs? Raise your hand. Oh, we don't see any? Okay, 1, 2, all right, okay, all right. Okay, that's only I see? All right. There has been a little bit of movement, particularly with IFC, with the idea of, what I call the Black Lives Matter edition of DEI, right? IFC came out with a statement, their diversity statement. Now, like I said, I've been an Alpha for 37 years. And Alpha, by the way, is an MPAC and IFC. I had never seen alpha being used in anything for IFC until they actually needed a diversity kind of picture. So they show my brothers kneeling, right? Okay, great. But why were they kneeling, which is not mentioned in their statement, is against police brutality. Now, they come with a word salad, type of statement where they talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and all the nice words. But there was one thing that got me. They were talking about that they didn't want to inadvertently further racism. Now, that's something that you all should understand. And when we talk about historical issues and not too historical history issues about racism within IFC and Panhellenic, these are not just accidental. These come from a root, and we've been dealing with that weed of that root for over 100 years. And it's important for us to know this. The very first thing you should know is that when we talk about IFC Panhellenic, 90%, up until the 1960s, 90% had discriminatory racist clauses within their constitutions. Kappa Delta Rho, Sigma Kappa. Sigma Kappa in 1951 was talking about, hey, only people who are going to come in here are Caucasian race, but don't write this or tell anybody about this. No letters on this subject are to be written, okay? Or by religion. If you were, basically it was said, you couldn't be a Negro, of the Mongolian race, of Mexican heritage, or of Hebrew faith. You could not be in the organizations. And in this particular one, this student who was Jewish could not become a member in 1949. Remember I said that I started my research in 1946, and there was a reason. 1946, universities all across the country began recognizing the fact, and they started setting up human rights commissions for the one thing. But they also talked about the fact that when it came to they just fought a war against racism and bigotry and the horrors of the World War II. And they didn't understand why they had to continue to have discrimination on the campuses with racist clauses within the constitutions of IFC Panhellenic. And so they said to IFC Panhellenic, you have to get rid of these clauses. Well, the head of IFC, this guy, David Embry, was like, no, turn that frown upside down. This discrimination is great. I love discriminating ear, eye, and mind and soul. So he fought that. But he wasn't the only one. This woman, Julia Ober, Kappa Delta president, in 1958, talked about, I don't think there's anything wrong with being white or restricting membership to voluntary associations to the white race. This was not anything unusual. And that actually brings me to someone that I write about. This woman is Patricia Hamilton, and she's Patricia Hamilton Jai right now, right? She pledged Delta Gamma at Beloit College in 1962. And when she pledged Delta Gamma, the headquarters found out, and they suspended the chapter, and they suspended her. And what happens is very unusual. On Beloit's campus, there's a protest, but the protest isn't about the fact that this woman had been discriminated against. They were protesting, the fraternities and sorority members were protesting the fact that Delta Gamma had been suspended because they had kicked off campus because they had been seen as a racist organization. But the curious thing about this particular woman is that this is Patricia Hamilton Jai. She used to be here at Ohio University. She used to be, for 25 years, the director of equity programs here at Ohio University. But that doesn't mean we don't have people within our organizations, IFC and Panhellenic, who were admitted kind of as unicorns. Bill Laurie in 1954 at Beta Theta Pi. He's still alive, he's still here. But that isn't evidence against racism within Beta Theta Pi, because this is Beta Theta Pi too at University of Florida. Now, for all of you, this is Black History Month. There's one thing I would want you to remember about Martin Luther King's speech. One statement. Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance or conscientious stupidity. And you know where we see sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity? Every Halloween, Martin Luther King's birthday, Black History Month, and Cinco de Mayo. Every single year, over and over and over. I have yet to see a year when it hasn't occurred. And so what happens is that students of color are forced then to show their protest for their own humanity, because that is not their job when they come on college campus, but they take the mantle to do it. And it's not like your fraternity and sorority life don't create colorful infograms for you. They do. All you got to do is just don't get to the red. But what happens is that people don't give a damn. So let's see some examples we've seen over the years. Kappa Alphas with their Old South Party. Now, to be fair to Kappa Alpha has been trying to get rid of all the Confederate iconography for over a decade. The Confederate flag, the Robert E. Lee whole thing. But in this, some still love dressing up like antebellum South. But look in the middle. That guy is covered in black paint. What does he have written down the middle of his chest? Slave. Not just, by the way, with phones. This is happening I'm going to show you from different generations. Good pickings tonight for Delta Zeta at University of Louisville in the early 1950s. They're in blackface with what they call pickaninny braids. When I was doing my research in the archives, I turned it over and they said they won for Best Homecoming Float. Okay, Tri-Delts, 2019, taking a picture saying, I am a nigga. Kappa Sig, Duke University, they had something they called the Asia Prime Party with a racist email that they sent out to everyone as an invitation. Fiji, Phi Gamma Delta, Mississippi State in the 1960s, smeared in paint. The Deeks, Delta Kappa Epsilon at LSU are notorious for at every tailgate having misogynist, homophobic, and racist banners out in front of the people hosting the tailgate. Now, every time this happens, people protest LSU and say LSU needs to do something about Delta Kappa Epsilon. That's not what LSU can do. LSU can't do it. That's the whole point of what the First Amendment is about. First Amendment says the state can't abridge your speech. LSU rightfully can't abridge their speech. But know who can? Delta Kappa Epsilon can. They're a private organization. Why don't they do it? Now, the reason why they may not do it is because just maybe about 30 years before, right down the road at Tulane, Delta Kappa Epsilon was in blackface going through black neighborhoods in New Orleans. If your advisor, I'm not saying these are their advisors, but if your advisor or your alums have been doing this during their college years, what's the chance they're going to change when it comes to your time? Beta Theta Pi, Auburn University, it's a cornucopia of white supremacy. You have the KKK uniform, the Confederate flag, the blackface. And what do we have around his neck? A noose. Are we still saying that Parker Rice and Levi Pettit are the only ones to talk about lynching African Americans from a tree? Pi Kappa Alpha, University of Georgia in the 1970s. Now, Tau Kappa Epsilon at Arizona State, they knew enough for their Blackout for MLK party to not put on blackface, but they still wanted to make sure that you knew they were denigrating black people. So what do? They have the low-hanging pants, to emulate the inner city. You have the basketball jerseys. Now, some of you say, well, that's just hip-hop. No. What does she have in her hand? Watermelon, as a connector, as a racist connector to racism. Alpha Chi Omega, Auburn, 1950s. Tri-Delts, with their Bloods and Crips party. Clemson Christmas with this SAE. Kappa Alpha had the University of Georgia in the 1980s. University of North Carolina, Charlotte with Sigma Kappa had red face. Late 1960s, Kappa Kappa Gamma, blackface. Chi Omega, 2020, blackface. To quote Rosa Parks. Chi Psi, University of North Carolina. Have you seen the repeated idea of entertainment about killing black people as entertainment within IFC and Paladin? Now, I know why students do this. Because a lot of times they think that they're actually being provocative, or within that space, they can dominate the space, so no one's going to push back. Who's actually going to be the peer that actually says this is wrong? Or who's going to be the person who's just going to giggle and say, you shouldn't do that? But they giggle and let it happen. But what happens is that those students don't recognize is that what they're connecting themselves to is one of the oldest white supremacist entertainment forms, which is minstrelsy. Which whole thing was about white people putting on blackface in order to denigrate the humanity of black people for comedy. That's what it is. So if you don't want your IFC or Panhellenic organization to be connected to that, don't let me see you in the blackface. And you can't be surprised with these type of incidents occurring that students of color don't particularly think that Greek rows are that welcoming to them. Particularly at University of Wisconsin did a study saying that as soon as the alcohol began to flow, so did the race and sexist slurs began to flow. And as though that they wanted to prove the point, SAE at the University of Wisconsin was suspended for calling black women niggas and bitches. University of Southern California, this woman, Rennie Sampath, was a student government president. She was walking down the Greek Row, walked in front of an IFC house. One IFC man took an empty liquor bottle, threw it, barely missed her, then called her an Indian piece of shit. Chi Omega, Penn State, will mow law for weed or beer. I don't cut grass, I smoke it. We talk in fraternalism all the time about living your values. Which one of them live their values? Kappa Alpha Theta, Columbia University. This is just one picture. They had a bunch of different pictures of them dressed up in blackface and so on and so forth. I'm not trying to beat up on Kappa Sig, but y'all got a few of these. Run for the Border Party at Rollins College. Cinco de Drinko Party at Baylor University. 80 Pi, Texas State, and Red Face. Then the University of Alabama. They had a very bad year in 2018. Alpha Phi. This woman was in the back of a car recording a video where she was yelling, "Get me away from these niggas." Then after recruitment, this woman was on Snapchat saying, "Chi Omega got no niggas." And then we come to Haley Barber from New Jersey. And Haley Barber had actually been checked. Her sorority sister had actually said, stop saying the word nigga on Martin Luther King's birthday. And her response on her Finsta, like we know, even old people still know that y'all still got their private Instagrams. Nigga, I don't care if it's Martin Luther King's day. Nigga, I'm in the South now, bitch. And then she got kicked out of Alpha Phi, and I think she left the University of Alabama. But she's not alone. The Teeks made their pledges pretend to be slaves. Alpha Gamma Rho, Oklahoma State. Are we still blaming these two white 19-year-olds, Parker Rice and Levi Pettit, for being the only ones? And when some fraternities and sororities figured out that they couldn't denigrate minorities anymore, they decided to denigrate the homeless. And it's leaking into high schools. How many of you saw this video? Any of you seen this video? You should see it. In Philly, there's a woman, it's a full video of this woman with a spray paint painting this woman's face black, and she's saying, you're a nigga, and saying something, you're a nigga now. And then in 2015, this occurred. I don't know if any of you remember this, right? 2015 in Arizona, these students were all wearing different t-shirts that said something like congratulations to the class of type of deal. And then they said, oh, look what this spells. Now, I love how the media put blocks over their faces, but then again, I'm not part of the media, so, I don't know. But here's the important part to understand. White supremacy, when we talk about it overcoming freedom and democracy, which I'm hoping all of you believe in, white supremacy is about normalizing cruelty. Because if I can do that, I can kill you. If I can make normalizing cruelty the thing, I can kill you. It's like boiling the frog slowly. So what do we mean? Well, it's like Kappa Alpha Order, University of Mississippi. A couple of years, 2019 or so, right before the pandemic, they went shooting. Cool, fine, all right, I love shooting. All right, but you know what they shot at? It's target practice? Shot at the Emmett Till memorial sign. Now, for those of you who do not know who Emmett Till was was a teenager who was down in Mississippi. He had supposedly, although they said it didn't happen, whistled at a white woman. He was then abducted from his house, beaten and beaten and killed. And that is his disfigured face that that his mom decided she wanted the world to see. But then today, you don't have to go all the way back to the 1950s. About a year ago, it was like I want to say about 70, 75, historically black college universities started getting bomb threats. Indiana University, an Asian student was stabbed. This is only a couple of January 13th of this year. A couple of weeks ago at Kennesaw State in Georgia, this young man was beaten by two fraternity men. Now, this is just the front side. The back side is that they tore out of his locks, so it tore him out of his scalp. So what do we do? How do we deconstruct these systems of inequity? Well, the first thing my hero, Angela Davis, says, racism is systemic. Stop thinking it's just individual aspects. That's the lie that we tell ourselves. Racists do racist things. Hey, they're easy to point to and say they're the problem. They're not the problem. The people who are the problem are the non-racists. The ones who find themselves to be morally superior because they didn't do the actual act, but they didn't say anything. You're in a fraternity or sorority because you said that you actually want to follow the principles and ideals that your founders created over 100 years ago. And you don't say anything when it comes to something aberrant happening within your circle? That's not following your values. In order to do something, you have got to be, it says anti-racist, but in reality, you just got to take action. And I don't care if it's action that is centered around racism, homophobia, or sexism. You have to take action. That's what this is about. If you believe in freedom and democracy, you have to take action in order to make sure that every single person has that right to freedom and democracy. If you don't say anything, then what you're doing is that you're making another person into a second-class citizen. And then you have to deconstruct IFC and Panhellenic organizations. Now look, I told you, Alpha is an IFC. I ain't saying abolish them. I'm a life member of my organization. They're gonna have to pay me a lot more money to get back. And I'm president of my chapter. I'm not saying that. But you, in IFC and Panhellenic, you're gonna have to start listening to your students of color within your ranks. For the longest, IFC and Panhellenic didn't even have demographics about who was in their organizations. A lot of organizations still don't. Listen to them within your chapter. Stop assuming that they're having a great time in your chapter. Do an exit interview to find out if they had a great experience in your chapter from the start to finish. And don't wait for minorities to help you do this. You are perfectly able to go and do racial justice on your own. Tap into your DNA. You're a Delta Gamma. Delta Gamma is doing good. Well, they tapped into their DNA and said, hey, we're going to do good. Doing good means doing better. And don't use NPHC or MGC organizations as part of your diversity, equity, and inclusion program. Having it come to step and stroll at your house is not diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, here is equity. If you say, for example, you have a philanthropy, and you say, hey, we're doing the Susan B. Komen breast cancer walk, right? And you ask Delta Sigma Theta. Delta Sigma Theta has 4 members. Delta Sigma Theta comes over and participates. And your chapter has 40 members, right? If you bring 4 members to their Jabberwocky, if you bring 4 members over there, that's not equity. They brought 100% of who they are to your space. You bring 100% of who you are to their space. That's what we talk about when we talk about equity. And we got to deconstruct the campus environment. It's important for everyone to speak up. This is 1989. I know for y'all, I know it's the olden days, but it's the 1989. You see the guy in the middle with the flat cap? That's me. That's me actually speaking up. Yeah, I know, ain't that something? Yeah. So that's me speaking up. And what are we talking about? Campus racism. You know what? It's a long game. Social justice is a long game in terms of actually getting equity. So is the campus better for the students on campus today in 2023 than it was in 1989? Yeah, of course, because we make progress. But then again, it's also white students speaking up against people that they say are perpetrating things that don't represent them. Remember that Kappa Alpha Old South party? Well, the white students were the ones saying, this isn't my heritage, this is not my tradition. And I love what Yale says. We out here, we've been here, we ain't leaving, and we are loved. That means that every student who comes to Ohio University should feel that. I mean, whether or not you're a white student or a student of color, you should feel that. And if you don't feel that, then somebody should be held accountable to that. When you first walk into an IFC or a Panhellenic organization, and I would tell people, I believe in the fact that you find fraternalism where you find fraternalism. And so if a student of color walks into an IFC or Panhellenic organization, they should feel fraternal from the minute they walk in to the minute they walk out. And if you don't, then you need to figure it out. And we don't give a damn about your Black, Latinx, Asian, or Native American best friend when it comes to campus racism incident. A lot of people say, well, I can't be racist because I got Black friends. Yeah, you can. You know, yes. Just like you can be misogynist with a girlfriend. Perfectly fine. We have most misogynists have girlfriends. It's important for you to understand that. You have to take responsibility for that. I mean, Parker Rice, he had a Black friend. Didn't stop him from singing about lynching African Americans from a tree. But it's also important to recognize this other thing. Parker Rice and Levi Pettit are not racist in their DNA. It's not an immutable trait within who and what they are. You don't do something and then it's suddenly you can't change or you can't make demonstrative acts to say, I repudiate that and this is what the things I've learned and the things that I want to do. So I'm hoping that at some point in time, he's been able to do that, just like everyone in my presentation. I want to leave you with this one thing. I don't know, this is me at Belmont University in Nashville. They gave me a bow tie because, as I said, I was the only alpha they knew that didn't have a bow tie. If you see over my left on your right side, it's a woman with red hair and a black and white stripe. That's D'Ebony Graves. So D'Ebony Graves and I met before the lecture, and we had a great time talking. Just went on phenomenal. I tell you, I'm not trying to pander to you all. I believe that you all are way smarter than I was walking into college. And she just had a very vivacious, just forward-thinking type of attitude and point of view. So I remembered her. Like 4 months after this picture, I wake up. You know how you wake up, you turn on all your electronics, and your phone is blowing up, and it's, you know, people like something that you posted, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. My phone is blowing up. And they said, oh, wow, you know, there's been another overnight mass shooting. And I'm thinking, okay, I mean, I hate to say it, but we have those all the time. And then they were like, yeah, it happened in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I go into a fraternity and sorority group that we have for professionals, and they go, some Belmont students were murdered. And I go, wait, I'm just there. And then I frantically look for the names, And then it finally comes out, it was D'Ebony Graves. What happened was a guy who was a member of a group called the right-wing white supremacist Sovereign Soldiers. He comes in with a automatic assault-style rifle, and he starts shooting into a Waffle House. And one of my fraternity brothers, James Shaw, wrestles the weapon away from him, but not before he kills like 4 or 5 people, one of which is D'Ebony Graves. D'Ebony Graves is dead. We're not bringing her back. She's a member of Delta Sigma Theta. We're not bringing her back. She's not going to be able to live the life in which she wanted to live. Her family is not going to love her, be able to love her in the way that they wanted to love her before. She's not going to be the benefit of a person who was able to go through K-12 and finally reach the transformative place that she wanted to be, all because one person decided she wasn't a human being. So all of the different things I've showed you, the metaphorical things, the philosophical things, and the physical things when it comes to white supremacy and racism, all culminate to the idea that she's not a human being. What is your contribution going to be to this? Is your contribution going to be to just laugh it off and say, well, it doesn't really bother me? Or is your contribution going to be that you actually speak up? Blackface didn't kill D'Ebony Graves. Blackface is a product of the racism that killed D'Ebony Graves. And it's a damn shame when we talk about college campuses and IFC and Panhellenic that we oftentimes are the places where that comes up over and over again. My job is to let you know that you have to take action about it. I don't care whether or not it's in your chapter, your community, your family, your church, or just on a grand stage, your nation. Don't matter if you're conservative or progressive, Republican, or Democrat. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't matter to me. Take action. That's why you're here at Ohio University. Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all. So, there you go. So, any questions? I'll be happy to take any questions that you have. I've never gone in 23 years to any school and not have one question being asked. Who's going to be the brave person to stand up and say something? Everybody's like, oh. So you don't have any questions? Let me see, where are my DEI people? You're like, why did you ask me this? Do you have any questions about what you should do within your organization?
No, I already went to my chapter advisor about some ideas that I had already installed and stuff.
What fraternity? Acacia. Okay, cool. All right, so what ideas, what do you think about doing?
Since it is Black History Month, I want to do some things with Black History, such as like a march or we like a big sale, fundraise for our chapter, stuff like that.
Okay. All right, one of the things I would say, raise your hand for DEI, folks. Again, I only see like 3 or 4, maybe 2. Okay, DEI, one of the things that you should make sure to do is that when you create your strategy for your chapter when it comes to your whole year, is include DEI into everything that you actually do. It is not just to simply wait for Black History Month. I'm not trying to say anything about you, but it should be in your in terms of the treasury, in terms of how you spend your money. It should be into your philanthropy, how you're doing your philanthropy. So if you're doing your philanthropy, for example, and it's always in the exact same space and there are no students of color, move your philanthropy to places where there are students of color. Think about who you're giving money to, where you're doing your social activities. Who are you inviting to your social activities? Do those things on a regular basis, and it will be integrated. It won't rely upon just the DEI chair to figure out what are the things the chapter is going to do. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate all y'all.